Well, in America today, it's a holiday. I'm not sure it's today yet. It might be tomorrow for them. In any case, it will be Father's Day. And I was thinking during the chanting that we dedicated to Divine Mother, and then in the Gita reading, in the affirmation, which was an affirmation of love, I was thinking, at least in the Gita reading, we got to Dharma and male energy kinds of things in terms of connecting these things to the subject of Father's Day. But then I was thinking about it, and I came to the thought that why is it that we don't associate fathers with love? We usually associate fathers with, stern disciplinarian and the provider of the food and the protector, But why is it that we don't think that fathers are loving as a first idea? And it's interesting that, in worldly consciousness, we're always thinking outside of ourselves. So that's really the definition of worldliness, is that you associate your sense of self with that which is outside and not that which is inside. And so in that association, we look at male and female like two sides of a coin. So you have the male side and female side, heads and tails. And so because and there's some higher truth in this, that male energy tends to be more outward, doing-oriented, achievement-oriented, where female energy is more nurturing, more being. But the soul is neither male nor female. So we have to recognize that we are all a blending of these two aspects of manifestation. When we relate to life thinking that I'm the body, therefore I am in a male body, I am a man, and I take on manly traits. I have a deep voice, and I have to be strong. And these are things that we take on, and we don't necessarily think about why we do it. And much of our sense of personality is taken from our environment, and it's very common for children to take on the traits of their parents. And certainly there is a lot of outward reasons why that would be true, both in terms of genetics and in terms of environmental influences. But throughout history, we see that children often reject the style and the values of their parents and seek their own truth elsewhere. So we know that that in itself cannot define how a person ends up being the way they end up. And anyway, I have a story to share today that I believe is an interesting blend of male energy as the father, and yet the loving energy as our nature being connected to universal love. Before I tell the story, I want to remind, if you remember in Autobiography of a Yogi, in the resurrection of Sri Teshwar. Of course, Sri Teshwar he was married, but he did not have a son. And I don't actually remember what happened to his wife, but he later became a Swami and took sannyas. And when the master came to Sri Teshwar for training, Sri Yukteswar said, you know, I did have the desire to have a son that I could train spiritually. And so, in the most beautiful way, Master became Sri Yukteswar's spiritual son, and was trained in that spirit. But Sri Yukteswar's personality was quite stern. He was quite the male. He was the lion of Bengal. He wasn't the pussycat of Bengal. He wasn't the easygoing great saint. He was the lion, and he was perceived as a very strong and stern teacher. But in the resurrection of Sri Yukteswar, and he resurrected his body, and Master embraced him and hugged him. And Sri Yukteswar's, it's interesting, Yogananda conveyed somehow, so beautifully, vibrationally, the change that was in Sri Yukteswar, that Sri Yukteswar, the spirit, was not the same as Sri Yukteswar, the personality. The personality was quite stern, but Sri Yukteswar, resurrected, was no longer that personality. He was very loving and laughing and joyful and extremely open and demonstrative, where in the personality of Sri Yukteswar, he was not demonstrative. And Sri Yukteswar even said, "I'll rebuke you no more." And of course, Master said, "Oh no, please rebuke me." Because the truth is that the chela, the disciple, never wants the guidance of the guru to be gone. Please continue to guide me. Continue to be that inspirational and guiding force in my life. And so I always thought that was a very beautiful way to understand that our personality is not who we are. To recognize that character traits that manifest through the personality are a very limited expression of a much larger soul reality. And that we can choose how we express the qualities of our lives, in this case, fatherhood. What kind of parent do we want to be? Do we want to be only what our parents gave to us? Or do we want to, in some way, improve upon, if possible? Of course, if you grew up with a father who was loving and guiding, and you had a harmonious relationship, then you would want to be just like that. But if that relationship was not positive, then you might want to be different. Anyway, this story is from a book called The Chosen, and it is a work of fiction, but it tells a very beautiful story that I think is, could very possibly take place. And it's about a Hasidic rabbi. The Hasidic rabbis, they're very conservative, and they have styles of dress and a very strong, very specific culture, and the way that they express the Jewish tradition. And this Hasidic rabbi was extremely well known, one of the best known Hasidic rabbis, very well respected, very large congregation. And his son was naturally going to be his spiritual heir. His son was going to be, was being groomed to take over when he passed. And his son was at this time of early university age. And I'd say, 18, 19. And the son was incredibly smart, almost a photographic memory. And so his father would give a sermon in the morning, and then they would have everyone in the congregation, they'd all have lunch together. And then at the after lunch, the rabbi would speak. And he would speak for 20, 30 minutes or more at that time. Again, and then afterwards, he would say to his son, "Okay, tell me." And what he meant by that was that it was now the son's turn to tell the congregation the one thing that the rabbi had said that was incorrect. Some small point of the teaching. Some little change that the rabbi had put in there on purpose to try to catch the son. And then the son would always, well, with all due respect, here's the mistake you made. And everybody would, be very impressed that he was in this long talk. He got that one subtle point. Well, it was interesting, though, that the father, as the son grew, began to speak directly with him less and less. He began to create distance between them. And the son played on the baseball team. And one day they were playing against another team. And the other team had non-Hasidic Jews in it. They were liberal Jews. And so while they were Jews, there was our way is better than your way feelings between the teams. And the Hasidic rabbi's son was a pitcher, and he was in baseball. You pitch directly at the batter. It's like cricket, except that in cricket the ball hits the ground. In American baseball, it doesn't. It goes straight. And anyway, the Hasidic son was known as a very, very talented pitcher, and he would pitch the ball very fast, and very few people were able to hit the ball. But it just so happened this one day, this boy, who was the son of a of a liberal rabbi, came up to bat and hit the ball. Not only did he hit the ball, but he hit it right at the son of the other rabbi and the pitcher, and it hit him in the face and knocked him to the ground. And they had to take him to the hospital. And so the liberal rabbi's son felt bad about that. And so he went to see him in the hospital. And through this experience, they became friends, began to converse with each other. And eventually, the Hasidic son brought this liberal boy home, and the two boys together studied the Torah with the rabbi father. And it was interesting, in this Torah study, just the two boys and the father would never talk to the son, only to his friend. And this distancing began to wear on the son. And he became not jealous of the other boy, but kind of heartsick in himself. He began to feel bad in his heart. And he yearned for his father to treat him just the way he treated his friend. And not only that, but his younger brother, the father was always touching and playing with the young boy. But to the elder son, he didn't do these things. And this began over a period of time to to really cause this internal struggle inside the son. And he couldn't understand it. And it pushed him away from his father and even away from the logical destination, which would be to take over for the father. And he went to university. He went to a non-Hasidic university. He began to go outside of his faith. And he began to see the world in terms of heart, in terms of its caring nature. And he sort of left his intellect behind a little bit and began to relate to that more a heartfelt part of life. And there was a point at which the son finally stood up to his father and says, "I'm not going to follow you. I'm not going to go this route. Because it breaks my heart that you don't love me the way that you love, my little brother here." And when the son stood up and did that, the father accepted it and didn't, try to convince him otherwise. But through the conversation with the other son, with the other boy, he had this conversation with the father, and then his father had the conversation with the father. Why are you treating your son this way? Why have you distanced yourself and caused this heartache in your son? And when the Hasidic rabbi sat down with the more liberal rabbi, and they had a talk man to man, and the Hasidic rabbi felt that he could explain to this other learned man that he did respect, even though their styles are different. And he had a word, I don't remember the word for it, but there was actually a word for it. And it was a word for the recognition that sometimes you have to do something very drastic to fix something. And that drastic measure, in order to fix it, may be hurtful. We've talked about this before, how the doctor has to sometimes cause discomfort to the patient in order to heal them. And that pain, I mean, imagine, they say one of the most, in America, the profession that has the highest rate of alcoholism is dentistry. Dentists have the highest rate of alcoholism. And I don't know what the scientists say about it, but it seems to me that anybody who is flipping discomfort to people all day long, every day, would have to deal with that, and it would be very difficult. It should be very difficult to be the guy who does that all the time. Anyway, to do this to someone in your family, if you don't care, it's not so, you don't care. It doesn't hurt you on the in your emotions. But this man cared very deeply, and he had taken on the particular route of distancing himself with his son because he recognized that his son's intellect was to such a degree that his heart wasn't being included in the totality of his consciousness. And he was afraid for his son, that his son would grow up without a heart, feeling superior and separate from everybody. And he had reason to go that direction. And so he took it on himself to take this drastic measure consciously, not because it was his nature, because it was his duty, to make sure that his son grew up with a heart. And that was more important for his life than the idea that he would carry on in his footsteps. This was an incredibly large sacrifice that was not recognized by anyone until the rabbi finally explained it to his friend's father. The father must make sacrifices at times that are not always known. But the father must always also have the wisdom to make these choices and the humility to change in route should that be necessary. And this story is extreme in its own way, in that the father had to do something very difficult. How many fathers have done even terrible things in the name of helping their children? We value loyalty and the responsibility of parenthood, but we should also remember that without Dharma, we can't serve others well without doing things with a dharmic, with a right consciousness, and that it be morally right. The Father can express love and does express love, oftentimes in ways that are not recognized. And it's important to acknowledge that. When we pray to God, God as Father and God as Mother, we should recognize that the Father loves us just as much as the Mother. Because the Father's nature is infinite love. Just as in the affirmation today. The nature of life itself is love. So, Father, in its most beautiful expression, must be foundationally rooted in love. But Father is also power. But Father should also be wisdom, and joy, and peace, and shining the light of good intention and positive presence. All of these qualities of infinite spirit should be manifested by each one of us. According to our nature, we need to find that male-female balance. So it's always kind of awkward in my mind. We celebrate Mother's Day and Father's Day. We take the time to say specifically, yes, we recognize this act of service. Remember, fatherhood is stewardship. It's not ownership. And many parents think that they own their children. They don't. The idea that you should expect anything back from your child, even love, is a selfish desire. Love must be given without expectation of return. And only then is it love. Otherwise, it's desire. I positively desire you, and to positively desire me. That's not love. That's self-interest. And the idea in the affirmative says if we want to experience love, it's not love people loving us, it's love flowing through us towards others. When we are channels for divine love, then we can experience it. And only to the extent that we don't grasp it in our egos can it truly be love. Otherwise, it's has selfish intent. So, when we celebrate Father's Day, we should celebrate the spirit, the infinite spirit of love manifesting through our lives towards others. And it shouldn't be just towards our own family, but towards our larger family of all mankind. And in fact, of all creatures everywhere. And so, the celebration of Father's Day isn't just about being male or female. It's looking at our nature and bringing about balance. Recognizing that to be loving, we have to be wise. And that sometimes the expression of love is difficult. It's challenging. It's a responsibility that can cause discomfort. But it leads to something much greater. And the recognition, when we talk about living by Dharma, the recognition that we must act in love, even if the other person doesn't recognize our act as an act of love. Oftentimes we do big things for people and they don't know, one, they don't know we did them, but two, they don't know our motivation. And so just like Sri Teshwar, if you only look at his personality from that incarnation, you say, well, he was stern. But when Master wrote about him, when he resurrected, he was so much more than that. We are all so much more than the personalities that we now live through. And what we really want to do is begin to identify ourselves not with the personality that we're in now, but with the infinite spirit from whence we've come. That's animating only to a small degree. Master used to say that the soul, the personality is like an iceberg. An iceberg is mostly underneath. Only the very tip is sticking out of the water. This is what we see now. The personality that we see is only just a little tip. The soul that animates the personality is just a little bit of that much larger reality. So take the time to introspect on the way that spirit is manifesting through you, and seek to bring balance, male-female balance, to that expression. And the more we recognize the way that we are living and accept it, then we can consciously, there's a freedom in it. Because if we're not honest with ourselves, then we are bound. We can't get free without being in truth. When we see ourselves clearly for what's actually happening, then we can accept it and then try to improve it. But they say with most challenges in life, the first step is to acknowledge there's a challenge. If you never acknowledge it, you can't fix it. So today we can be thankful for the earthly father, to appreciate that God through our fathers has brought us into the world, and to the extent that they have nurtured us, we give thanks. To the extent that their energy hasn't been very nurturing and has motivated us to do other things, we could be thankful for that too. It's all about the spirit in which we take it. But most importantly, we recognize that God, the Father, has given us everything in this world, all the tools and the opportunities that we need to experience love through our lives. Just the way that in the story that earthly father tried to bring love out in his son's life, God has given us the opportunity through our Sangha, through our Guru, and through every experience in life, ultimately an opportunity to live more consciously in God's love, in God's joy.